the exact way when you left it. So you guys are pretty good with technology, so that's not a big deal. So today during our story time, we are going to be reading Ban This Book. We started it last week. A couple of people were here last week when we started it. And what has happened so far is a girl named Amy Ann Olinger is our main character, and she went to the library to check out her favorite book, The Mixed Up Files from Mrs. Basil Frankenweiner, and it wasn't there. And her librarian told her that she'd actually had to remove it from the shelves because a parent had complained and the school board had decided it needed to be removed. Now, this upset Amy tremendously. She lives at home with two little sisters that annoy her all the time. One pretends she's a pony, the other one she shares a room with and just drives her crazy. I'm sure you all don't have any younger brothers or sisters that drive you crazy either. But she goes to the library. That's her safe place. That's where she escapes to. That's where she goes to have her quiet time, her space away from other people. And that she feels like has sort of been disrupted because her favorite book is gone. And there's even more books that the librarian has had to take out of the library because of this parent that's complained. And the librarian asked Amy to go to the school board to talk about why this book was her favorite. And she did, but Amy lost her nerve. She got scared when it was her turn to talk to the school board. And so she lost her nerve. And so she was disappointed in herself. And she's sort of struggling with that at the moment because she doesn't know what she's going to do. So think about how you might feel if you had to talk in front of a whole bunch of adults, and how scary that might have been, and then feeling disappointed in yourself that maybe you let somebody down because you weren't able to do it. So the start of this chapter is called Girl with a Mullet. Sometimes I like to pretend I'm a main character in a book. My mom and dad and sisters and Rebecca are all characters too. And Mrs. Jones, maybe, and Mr. Vaughn, my teacher, and all the other kids in my class. But I'm the main character. I'm the one who explains everything that's happening in my own voice. One of the things that happen too. The only problem is the best books aren't the ones where stuff happens to the main character. The best books are the ones where the main character does something, like run away to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. That's what the main character does in her favorite book. That's why I never could really be a main character in a book. I never do anything. I'm stuck in my bookmark in from the mixed up files right at the point where Claudia and Jamie collect the $2.87 from the restaurant fountain in the museum and watched out the window as the bus took me to school. I was read all the way through my new copy of From the Mixed Up Files already once before I went to bed. We stopped at Rebecca's house and she flopped down on the seat next to me. How was the board meeting? She asked. I shrugged. You would have liked it. They said make a motion, and I second that a lot. Ooh, Robert's Rules of Order, Rebecca said. That's what they're called. They were written by Robert somebody or another. No kidding, I thought, but I didn't say so. Did you read that thing you wrote? Rebecca asked. I looked out the window. No. Amy Ann, you worked on that all week. I shrugged. Mrs. Jones talked, though, right? What happened? Nothing. All the books are still banned. Yeah, my dad, but I thought that was one of them. Well, yeah, but my dad bought this one for me. Rebecca took the book from me and looked at the cover. You're all the time talking about what a great book this is. So, what's so bad about it? Nothing, I told her. That lady said it teaches kids to lie and steal and cheat. But they don't do any of that stuff. Only now I thought about it. They do lie about running away to the museum. And Jamie does cheat at cards. So I guess you could call it cheating when they take the coins from the fountain. Well, they kind of do, I guess, I said. Rebecca's eyes lit up. Cool. Can I read it? I was surprised. All the times I talked about from the mixed up files, Rebecca had never once been interested in reading it. That is, until now. Okay, I said. I pulled my bookmark out and gave it to her. Only don't lose it. Rebecca looked pleased with herself. She started flipping through to look at the pictures. I grabbed the book and closed it. Don't look ahead, you'll spoil it. Danny Purcell leaned over the back of our seat. Hey, what are you guys talking about? Trey's mom. The book's Trey's mom got banned. Rebecca blushed the way ladies do around my dad. Like Danny, only she never said so. But sometimes when I was talking to her in class, I realized she wasn't listening. It was always because she was watching Danny. I didn't get it. Danny was nice and he was good at sports and gym class, but all he really seemed to care about was his hair. And he had a big football helmet hair that he wore down to his eyes like frosting on a cupcake. He was all the time combing it down with his fingers to make sure it was swirling the right way. I saw the list in the newspaper, said Danny. You read the newspaper, I thought, but I didn't say it. I read the list and I realized I know one of these books, like not from class. It took me a while, but I remembered why. We own one of them. It's on my bookshelf in my house. It's been there like forever. Which one? Danny threw his head back and flipped his hair into place. Something about waiting for a girl. I don't remember. The cover has this girl with a mullet talking to a ghost. What's a mullet? I ask. It's when your hair's short in the front and the sides, but long in the back. Danny explained, the hair expert. Girls don't wear mullets, Rebecca said. Well, this one does. I tried to remember the list of books. Is it Wait for Helen to Come? That's it. Mom said it was like her favorite book when she was a kid. Man, I hope she never had a mullet. That is not a good look. Wait Till Helen Comes was one of the books on the list I hadn't read. Can I borrow it? I asked. Rebecca and Danny both looked at me in surprise. Yeah, I'll bring it to you tomorrow. Rebecca looked at lasers at me like I was interested in Danny. I just want to read the book, I told her. I want to read it too, she told Danny. I squinted at her. Did she really want to read it, or was she just saying that because of Danny? Danny shrugged. Sure, I'll bring it tomorrow. You can read it after me, I told Rebecca. You've got to read from the mixed up files of Mrs. Basil Frankenweiner. To read first. Why do you guys care so much? Danny asked. Are these books really good or something? They have to be, Rebecca told him. Why else do you think they got banned? It took a few seconds, but the truth finally got through Danny's thick helmet hair. He nodded. Yeah. I bet they're full of good stuff, like the channels my parents block on the TV. Can You can borrow this one when I'm finished, she said, waving from the mixed up files under his nose. Now it was my turn to shoot laser from my eyes. Who did she think she was loaning my books out to other people? All right, cool, Danny said. Then he sat back in his seat, lifted his hands, and I lifted my hands to Rebecca's to say, what gives? But then she blushed. Whatever. At least I could be sure she actually had read it. The bus pulled up to school and I hauled my backpack into the aisle. That was when I saw who was sitting in the seat in front of us, Trey. He must have gotten on when I wasn't watching. How long had he been sitting there? Had he heard us talking about his mom and the banned books? Had he heard about me loaning mine out and asking to borrow Danny's? Trey flipped his sketch pad closed, put it in his backpack, and slid out past me. He gave me a quick look as he went by, but he didn't say a word. What was that supposed to mean? Had he heard us? Was he going to rat us out to his mom? Danny nudged me along, and I followed Trey off the bus. I was being stupid. So what if they were reading the books Trey's mom had banned from the library? They weren't library books, they were our books. And nobody but my parents could tell me what books I could and couldn't read. Mrs. Jones had said so, which gave me an idea. The next chapter, the big idea. Like the main character in the book, I finally was going to do something. I was going to read every book Mrs. Spencer and her friends had banned from the school library. I found the list in the newspaper in the library, just like Danny said. Here's the list. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret by Julie Bloom. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark by Alan Schwartz. Matilda by Ronald Dahl. Harriet the Spy by Louise Fitzhugh. Wait Till Helen Comes by Mary Dowling Hahn. It's Perfectly Normal by Robbie H. Harris. From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankenleiner by E. L. Klotz. All of the Judy Blume books by Barbara Park. All of the Captain Underpants books by Dave Pilkey. The Egypt Game by Cephalus Kate Snyder. And all of the Goosebumps books by R. L. Stein. So I'm going to pause talking. So in the chat box, tell me, have any of you all read any of the books from the list I just gave? Using the chat box, tell me what you think. Have you read any of those books that they got had banned from their library? I happen to know a few of you have because I've seen you check them out. I bet most of you have read a Judy B. Jones book or a Goosebumps book or the Captain Underpants books. Can you imagine them to me have telling me I had to take those books out of the library? All right, back to our book. Here we go. It wasn't exactly 11 books like Mrs. Spencer said. It was way more than 11 books when you counted the gazillion Goosebump books and the big shelf of Captain Underpants and the Junie B. Jones books. I had only read 5 of the books on the list, if you count reading a couple of Goosebumps and a couple of Junie B. Jones books. The others I'd read were Matilda, which was awesome, Harriet the Spy, which was awesome too, and From the Mixed Up Files, which was super awesome, of course. But I'd never heard of Perfectly Normal or The Egypt Game. The Egypt Game sounded especially good. And Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark and Wait Till Helen Comes, I'd seen on the shelf. But I'd never checked them out because they looked scary. And I'm not a big fan of scary books. But I definitely was going to read Wait Till Helen Comes Now. I hadn't read a Captain Underpants either, and I didn't want to. Captain Underpants was stupid. But I would read that one last. The only book I was worried about was Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. I knew the book, of course. It was on the shelf right beside Judy Blume's other books, like Tales of the Fourth Grade, Nothing, awesome, and Super Fudge, awesome. Shelbourne Elementary School goes up to sixth grade, so there are some books on the library that are for older kids. Are You There, God? Had the cover that said sixth grade to me. I'd heard older girls whispering about it in the school bathroom, so I'd always stayed away from it. But I was resolved. I was going to read each and every one of those books. Mrs. Spencer said I couldn't, just to spite her. I'm sure none of you have ever done anything just to spite somebody, just because they said you couldn't. I knew she'd never know, but it wasn't like I was going to do something to help Mrs. Jones get the books back on the shelf. But I still felt a secret thrill about doing something an adult told me not to do. That afternoon, I emptied my piggy bag out, not breaking it like Jamie did from mixed up files. I counted it up, $21.76. It was enough for 2 paperbacks at least. I asked Mom and Dad if we could go to the bookstore that night, and their reaction was exactly what you'd expect. Are you sure that's what you want to spend your money on? Dad asked. Why do parents always say that when they tell you if you want to buy something, do it with your own money? I knew what he meant. He meant, I don't think that's how you should spend your money. Yes, this is how I want to spend my money, what I want to spend my money on, I thought. And this time, I actually said it. Mom and Dad had one of those silent conversations with their eyes again. Dad sighed and said he'd run me to the bookstore after dinner. I need new shoes at the ballet store, Alexis said. Angelina hopped up and down. I want to go to for frozen yogurt. I need to hit the office store, Mom said. If we leave left now, we'll have time to grab tacos and do all four. Suddenly, my trip to the bookstore had become a family outing, and before I could even think something wasn't to say, Dad was fishing the keys out of the bowl by the door, and the dogs were barking and whining about us leaving. Alexis, Angelina, and I climbed into the back of our car. Angelina's car seat was in the middle, and I squeezed into one of the other sides, pushing toys and Cheerios into the floor. The whole car still reeked of spoiled milk from the drink Angelina had spilled a month ago. Before we had left the neighborhood, Thing One and Thing Two were whining. The sun's on me. I'm hot. You can sit on the other side when we leave the office store, Dad told her, which meant I was going to have to sit on the hot side in the sun. But no one cares about that. Amy Ann is touching me, Angelina whined. Mom, Amy Ann is touching me. Amy Ann, please don't touch your sister, Mom said. Her seat takes up half the back seat. How am I not supposed to touch her? Amy Ann, my mom said. I crossed my arms and slouched against the car door, trying to get as far away from Princess Angelina and her throne as possible. Now, do you see why I never say anything? Nobody listens anyway. We're not going to be At the bookstore too long, are we? Alexis said. Not too long, no, Dad said. Not if we all get the other things done and get home before bedtime. Going to the bookstore was the whole reason we were going out in the first place. Now it was something we had to squeeze in there so there was time for frozen yogurt. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Didn't matter. I had enough money in my pocket for two paperback books at least. And I already knew what books I wanted. Danny was going to loan me Wait Till Helen Comes. So I was going to buy The Egypt Game and It's Perfectly Normal, whatever that was. And I was going to read them both that very night. Not a novel. Well, it turns out Perfectly Normal is not a novel. It's a nonfiction book. And it's all about something Miss Spencer would say with pictures. Next chapter, The Wendigo. I was so embarrassed when I saw It's Perfectly Normal is about. I even asked somebody at the bookstore to help me find it. I could have died. As soon as I saw what it was, I put it back on the shelf really fast and ran away. I mean, there's stuff in there I do have questions about, but Mom and I have finally talked about some of it, and I'm not going to buy a book with my family right there. Instead, I bought The Egypt Game, which was a novel, and Scary Stories, a bunch of short stories, and I read them both that night. Wow. The Egypt Game was great. It was about these kids who build a pretend Egyptian altar in a creepy guy's backyard, and mysterious things start happening. Like maybe an Egyptian god is leaving the messages. I guess it got banned because somebody didn't like kids worshiping Egyptian gods, even if it was pretend. And there's somebody attacking the kids in the neighborhood too, which was really scary. But the book was awesome. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I read in the dark, in bed, which was a mistake. Oh my gosh, I'm still shaking. There's this story called The Red Spot about a girl who has a spider crawl on her face. That's bad enough. But the spider bites her or something and leaves a big red spot on her cheek, and her mom says it'll go away, but it doesn't. And a few days later, it explodes, and 100 baby spiders come crawling out of her face. And even worse, there's all these creepy pictures. I called the dogs to come and sit with me in bed while I read it, but that didn't even help. In another scary story, High Beams, a woman driving her car at night couldn't figure out why the car kept flashing their high beams at her. It turns out the killer snuck into the back seat of her car and the other driver saw it. And every time the killer raises up to attack her, a car behind her turns on its high beams to stop him. Mom, Amy Ann has her light on and I can't sleep, Alexis called, making me jump. Mom appeared at our door looking tired. Amy Ann, I don't mind you reading, but Alexis needs her sleep. And you do too. I nodded and turned my blankets high over me. I was shaking so bad I could barely hold my flashlight. But I wanted to read the story. I turned to the one called The Wendigo. It was about a man and his guide hunting part of Canada, which nobody ever goes. One night, the wind starts calling his name of his guide, and something comes swooping down out of the dark and snatches him up and flies away with him. The guide screams about something at his feet on fire, and he's gone. The hunter splits, but later he's by a campfire, and a strange man wrapped up in a blanket sits down next to him. The hunter's sure it's his old guide. The man disappeared that night. The hunter can't see his face, and the strange man won't answer his question. The hunter decides to lift the man's hat off his head, and underneath he sees, Mom! Amy Ann is still reading with her flashlight, Alexis cried. I screamed and exploded out from under my blankets. Alexis screamed because I surprised her, and the dogs went crazy barking like the man suddenly was in the room, and the whole ruckus brought Mom running. What's going on here? She said. Nothing, I whispered, hugging Flot and Jet with both arms. Across the room, Alexis stared at me in horror. Mom frowned. Whatever's going on, I need lights out and you both to go to sleep. I nodded and Mom left. I flipped the flashlight off and stuffed Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark under my mattress, where I couldn't see it. I finally got Flotsam and Jetsam settled back down and I pulled my blanket up over my head. I knew I wasn't going to sleep that night or maybe ever again. And we will stop right there. The next chapter is called Our Own Little Book Club. So, talk to me. What do you think? If that's the next